The Mafia boss followed his maid. What he saw made him lose control. The Moretti penthouse occupied the top 3 floors of a glass spire that pierced the Manhattan sky. It was a fortress of marble, steel, and silence. A monument to the man who owned it, and within that fortress, Carla Vescari moved like a ghost. She was a whisper of motion, her slim form draped in the simple black and white of the household staff. Her dark hair was always pulled back in a severe, tight bun, as if any loose strand was a betrayal of the invisibility she craved. Her job was to erase any sign of human existence, a fingerprint on a glass tabletop, a speck of dust on the black granite floors, a crease in a leather cushion. She was efficient, silent, and, above all, unseen. She kept her eyes down, studying the intricate patterns in the imported rugs, the grain of the dark mahogany, anything but the faces of the people who moved through these opulent rooms. From the mezzanine balcony that served as his home office, Luca Moretti watched her. He watched her often. Luca was not a man given to whimsy. He was all cold calculation, a king ruling his dark empire from a throne of glass and shadow. His city spread out below him, a glittering map of his power. He noticed everything. A flicker of fear in a lieutenant's eyes, a misplaced decimal on a ledger, the subtle shift in the political winds. And he noticed Carla. He had hired her himself, against his housekeeper's advice. Mrs. Davies had found her too fragile and jumpy, but Luca had seen something else in the interview. She had sat before his massive desk, her hands clasped so tightly in her lap her knuckles were white, and had refused to meet his gaze. But when he had asked her why she wanted to work here, she had finally looked up. Her eyes, a deep, bruised violet, held a universe of sorrow, but beneath it was a flicker of steel, a survivor's grit. He'd hired her on the spot. For 6 months, he had watched her. He was intrigued by her quiet grace, the way she moved with an economy of motion that was almost like a dance. But more than that, he was drawn to the profound, settled sadness that clung to her like a second skin. It was in the permanent tension in her shoulders, the way she held her breath when someone walked into a room, the haunted look in her eyes when she stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, staring not at the billion-dollar view, but at something far away, something he couldn't see. He noticed, too, how she flinched. Any sudden movement, any loud voice, and she would shrink. Sal, one of his younger, more boisterous bodyguards, had once rounded a corner too quickly and almost collided with her. Carla had dropped an entire tray of polishing cloths, her hand flying to her throat as she pressed herself flat against the marble wall. A sharp, terrified gasp cutting the air. Sal had apologized, bewildered by her extreme reaction. Luca, watching from the end of the hall, had filed the observation away. She avoided all the men on his staff, but she avoided Luca with a special, desperate intensity. If he entered the grand salon while she was dusting, she would not just excuse herself, she would evaporate, slipping through the nearest service door like a phantom. He was the most dangerous man she had ever met, and every instinct she possessed screamed at her to keep her distance. She could feel his gaze on her, heavy and assessing, and it made her skin crawl with a fear that was sickeningly familiar. One rainy Tuesday night, the fragile peace she had built shattered. Carla was in the main pantry, inventorying crystal, when her cheap prepaid phone buzzed in her apron pocket. She ducked into the adjoining utility closet, closing the door most of the way, and answered in a strained whisper. Luca was walking past, heading for the kitchen, when her voice, tight with panic, snagged his attention. "I told you, I don't have all of it," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I can have the rest by the 1st. Please, just give me 2 more days. Please. He's just a boy. He hasn't done anything." A pause, and then a broken sob. "I will. I'll get it. I promise." She hung up. A choked, desperate sound, like an animal caught in a trap, came from behind the door. Luca stopped, his shadow falling across the pantry threshold. The closet door opened. Carla emerged, her face pale, slick with tears. Her eyes were red-rimmed and frantic. She saw him and froze, her entire body going rigid. Terror.
stark and absolute, washed over her features. She looked like a deer cornered by a wolf. She didn't say a word. She ducked her head, brushing past him, all but running toward the staff elevator. Luca watched her go. She didn't clock out. She didn't speak to Mrs. Davies. She just fled.
From his window, 28 floors up, he saw her small figure burst from the building's side entrance. Forgoing the staff exit in her haste, she didn't even have an umbrella. She just plunged into the driving, miserable rain. A muscle in Luca's jaw tightened. He was supposed to be in a meeting in 30 minutes. He turned, grabbed his keys from the bowl on his desk, and shrugged on the black cashmere overcoat slung over his chair. He bypassed his own elevator, taking the service one. He ignored Sal at the security post. "Mr. Moretti, you want the car?" "No," Luca said, his voice flat. "I'm handling something personal." He hit the street seconds later. His black sedan was parked in its private spot. He got in, the engine turning over with a low, menacing rumble. He saw her, a block ahead, head down, walking fast. He kept his distance, letting one, then 2 blocks separate them. The rain was relentless, turning the city streets into glistening rivers of light and shadow. She didn't hail a cab. She didn't head for the subway. She just walked. She walked for miles. He followed her out of the glittering heart of Manhattan, over a bridge, and into the deepening shadows of the Bronx. The opulent towers gave way to squat, brick buildings, their faces scarred with graffiti. The streets were cracked, littered with trash. Barred windows and gated storefronts lined the sidewalks. Luca's lip curled in disgust. His car, a $400,000 Predator, looked alien in this urban graveyard. His eyes never left her. She was hunched against the rain, her thin jacket soaked through, but she moved with a desperate, unwavering purpose. She finally turned onto a dark, narrow street, lined with skeletal trees and overflowing dumpsters. She stopped at a tenement building that looked one strong wind away from collapsing. The paint was peeling in long, leprous strips, and a single flickering bulb buzzed fitfully over the entryway. She fumbled in her pocket for a key, her head on a swivel, constantly checking the dark street behind her. She disappeared inside. Luca parked across the street, cutting the engine and the lights. He blended into the shadows, his car just another dark shape in the gloom. He was a patient man. He had built an empire on patience and violence. He would wait. He did not have to wait long. 20 minutes later, a heavy-set man in a stained undershirt and baggy jeans emerged from the building's basement apartment. He was smoking a cigarette, his face a mask of greasy indolence. He looked up, scanned the street, and then, with a sigh, climbed the front steps and began pounding on one of the doors. Luca could hear the heavy, muffled thuds even from his car. Carla's door. Apartment 3. B. Luca got out of his car, the door closing with a soft, expensive thunk. He moved with a speed that belied his size, crossing the street and slipping into the alley across from the tenement. The building's front door was cheap metal and warped glass, offering a grimy view into the small, tiled hallway. The angle was poor, but he could see them. Carla had opened the door a crack. The man shoved it wide open, backing her into her own apartment. His voice was a low, guttural growl, but his gestures were loud enough. He was yelling, jabbing a thick finger in her face. Carla stood before him, shaking, holding out a small, crumpled wad of cash. He snatched it, counted it with insulting slowness, and then, in a gesture of pure contempt, threw the bills to the floor. "This is half, you stupid girl," his voice boomed, echoing in the stairwell. "Half? What am I supposed to do with half? I get paid on Friday." Carla's voice was a thin, terrified thread. "I can give you the rest then. I promise." "Promises don't pay the bank," the man snarled. He took a step closer, crowding her. She tried to step back, but she was already against the wall. Then he grabbed her. His thick, dirty hand clamped around her upper arm, digging in. Carla cried out, a sharp, choked sound of pain that she swallowed instantly. Luca's hand tightened on the rusted railing of the alley fence, the metal groaning in his grip. He saw her body go rigid, her eyes screwing shut, but she did not fight back. She was frozen, enduring. "You and the kid are out tomorrow," the landlord spat, his face inches from hers. "On the street. Unless—" He leered, his gaze dropping from her face to her chest. "Unless you can think of another way to pay. A more personal way." He gave her arm a violent shake, rattling her against the wall. Then he shoved her, hard. Carla stumbled, catching herself on the doorframe, her hips striking the wood with a dull crack. The man spit on the filthy hallway floor and stomped back toward his basement lair, slamming his own door behind him. The building fell silent, save for the dripping rain. Luca's rage was a cold, quiet thing. It settled in his chest, a block of ice. He memorized the man's face, the lumbering walk, the apartment number. He wanted to go in there, to drag the man out into the rain and break every bone in his hands. He stopped. The door to apartment 3B creaked open again. Carla peered out, her face a white mask of fear, checking to make sure he was truly gone. The moment she saw the hallway was empty. The false composure she had clung to dissolved. She slumped against the doorframe, her entire body shaking with reaction. She looked utterly, profoundly broken. She limped inside, leaving the door slightly ajar. Luca moved from the alley, silent as death. He slipped into the building's small, foul-smelling vestibule, pressing himself into the dark shadows beneath the stairwell. He could hear her. "Nico, it's okay. Sweetheart, he's gone. He's gone." Her voice was hoarse and thin, frayed at the edges. A small boy, no older than 8 or 9, peeked out from a dark bedroom. He had Carla's dark hair and her same huge, haunted eyes. He looked at the money scattered on the floor and then at his sister, his expression one of old, weary terror. He did not make a sound. Carla bent down, wincing as she put weight on her leg, and slowly picked up the crumpled bills. She forced a smile, and it was the most painful, heartbreaking thing Luca Moretti had ever witnessed. "See? All fine." She lied. She was rubbing her arm where the man had grabbed her. The fabric of her thin sweater pulled taut. Luca could see the dark, angry red marks already forming. "I brought you a sandwich from work. The good kind. With the turkey." She pulled a napkin-wrapped bundle from her bag. The boy, Nico, suddenly ran to her, launching himself into her arms. He hugged her waist, burying his face in her stomach, his small shoulders shaking. He remained completely, unnervingly silent. Carla held him, her eyes closing as she stroked his hair. "Shh, shh, it's fine," she whispered, her own voice thick with unshed tears. "It's all fine. I'll fix it. I always do." A single tear escaped, tracking a clean path through the grime on her cheek. She was exhausted, bruised, and lying to the only person she had in the world. Luca retreated. He backed out of the vestibule, making no sound. The air in his lungs felt like poison. He got into his car, the rich scent of leather and cedar filling his nostrils, a stark contrast to the smell of mildew and despair he'd just left. The driver's door shut with a heavy, final sound. He drove back to Manhattan, the windshield wipers beating a frantic, angry rhythm that matched the pounding in his skull. He stalked back into his penthouse. The silence that he usually found so comforting now felt oppressive. The vast, empty rooms mocked him. He poured a heavy measure of whiskey into a crystal tumbler, the amber liquid sloshing. He was angry. He was furious at a world that let predators like that landlord breathe the same air as she did. He was furious at the filth she was forced to call home, and he was consumed by a deep, unsettling rage at himself. She'd been under his roof for 6 months. He had seen her sadness, but he had not seen. He had not understood the shape of her despair, the acute, daily terror she lived with. He had noticed, but he had not acted. The next day, she was there, 7 a.m, on the dot. She wore the same pristine black and white uniform, her hair in the same severe bun. She looked as if nothing had happened, but Luca saw everything now. He found her in the library, dusting the baseboards. She was trying to hide it, but the hitch in her movement was obvious. She was hiding a limp, her left leg stiff, her hip clearly aching. He had seen her hit the doorframe. He was looking for it. He walked in, his expensive shoes silent on the Persian rug. "Carla." She startled, rising far too quickly. A sharp gasp of pain escaped her lips before she could swallow it. She flattened herself against a bookshelf, her eyes immediately finding the floor. "Mr. Moretti, you're limping," he said. It was not a question. Her head snapped up, her eyes wide with a familiar, sickening panic. No, I twisted my ankle getting off the bus. It's nothing, sir. I'm fine." Her voice was brittle, a thin sheet of glass about to shatter. He took a step closer. She flinched. It was not a small movement. It was a full-body recoil, a violent, instinctive tensing, as if she were bracing for a blow. She pressed herself so hard into the shelves that a leather-bound book rattled. Her fear was a physical presence in the room. Acidic and choking, it stung him more than a slap. He stopped immediately, holding up a hand, palm out. "I'm not going to hurt you." His voice was low, softer than he intended. "What happened to your arm?" She instinctively clutched her left arm, her right hand covering the spot where Luca knew a brutal bruise was blooming. "Nothing. I'm clumsy. I fell. It's my fault." "You're a terrible liar, Carla." Raw panic flooded her face, her breathing hitched. "Please, Mr. Moretti, I need this job. I'm fine. It won't affect my work. I promise. I'll be more careful. Please." He saw it was no use. She was too terrified, not just of him, but of the truth. She was trapped in a cage of her own fear, and he was just another predator circling it. He masked his frustration, his face becoming an impassive wall. "Carry on," he said curtly. He left her there, trembling among his priceless first editions. He went to his office, the one that overlooked the city, and stared out the window for a long, silent minute. Then he picked up his phone. Sal, his most trusted man, his quietest shadow, answered on the first ring. "Sal," Luca said, his voice flat and cold as steel. "I have a name, Carla Viscari. She works here. I want to know everything, where she came from, who the boy is, and why she's running. And I want to know the name of the scumbag landlord at apartment 3B on 181 Street in the Bronx. Find out who he is." He paused, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "And Sal, I want to know everything by morning." Luca hung up the phone. He looked out at the city that was his, and in that city, in a crumbling apartment, was a girl he suddenly, inexplicably, felt was his to protect. He hadn't noticed sooner, but he was in charge now, and Luca Moretti always finished what he started. The next morning, Carla arrived at the penthouse, her body a symphony of aches. The bruise on her hip had blossomed into a dark, ugly purple, and her arm throbbed with a deep, bone-deep pain. She did her best to move normally, her terror of being fired overriding the physical agony. She was polishing the enormous glass dining table when Mrs. Davies approached, her face set in its usual, neutral, professional mask. "Carla," the housekeeper said, "Mr. Moretti would like to see you in his office. He said to bring your glass cleaning supplies." Carla's stomach hollowed out. The blood drained from her face, leaving her skin cold and clammy. "He knows. He saw me lying. He's going to fire me." "Now?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "At once." Her hands trembled so violently that the cleaning spray bottle rattled against the caddy. She picked it up, her legs feeling like lead, and made the long walk to the mezzanine. His office door, a massive slab of dark walnut, was slightly ajar. She tapped on it softly. "Come in." His voice was a low rumble, and it vibrated straight through her. She pushed the door open and slipped inside, keeping her eyes fixed on the floor. The office was vast, dominated by a desk that looked like it was carved from a single block of obsidian. Behind it, floor-to-ceiling windows showcased a staggering, godlike view of Central Park. Luca was standing at the window, his back to her, dressed in a perfectly tailored gray suit. "Mrs." Davies said. "You wanted the windows cleaned, sir," she stammered, holding up her caddy as proof. "Yes," he said, without turning. "They get smudged." She moved to the windows, her heart pounding, a frantic, painful rhythm against her ribs. She was acutely aware of him, a mountain of silent power, just a few feet away. She sprayed the glass and began to wipe, her movements jerky and inefficient. "Your limp is worse today," he stated. She froze, her hand still on the glass. It's just stiff from the rain, sir." A heavy sigh. "Stop." She stopped, but she didn't turn. She couldn't. "Turn around, Carla. And stop calling me sir." Slowly, she turned. He was watching her, his dark eyes missing nothing. The cold, assessing look from yesterday was gone, replaced by something she couldn't identify, a quiet, focused intensity. "You're in pain," he said. "I'm fine." "That man," he continued, as if she hadn't spoken. "The one in your building, the landlord, did he do that to your hip?" Her breath caught in her throat. He knew. He had seen. How? Panic, cold and absolute, flooded her system. "I don't know what you're talking about. I was there. Carla, I saw him put his hands on you. I saw him shove you." She felt the room tilt. He had followed her. The powerful, terrifying Luca Moretti had followed her all the way to her hovel in the Bronx. The implications of that, the sheer strangeness of it, were too much to process. All she felt was a new, suffocating wave of fear. "Please," she whispered, her eyes filling with tears against her will. "Please, I need this job. I can handle it. He's just a bully. It's fine." "It's not fine." He moved from the window to a small, hidden bar, opening a discreet cabinet. He wasn't walking toward her, but for her. He took out a porcelain cup and a kettle of water that was already steaming. "Sit down. I have to work." "Sit down." His voice was soft, but it held the same absolute authority as his barked commands. She sank into one of the plush leather chairs opposite his desk, her cleaning caddy clutched in her lap like a shield. He made a cup of tea, the scent of chamomile and honey filling the air. He placed it on the desk in front of her. "Drink it." She stared at the cup, her hands still in her lap. This was a nightmare, a confusing, terrifying nightmare. Men like Luca Moretti didn't make tea for their maids. Men like him were the ones you ran from. "Why are you doing this?" she finally managed to ask. "Because I don't like seeing my staff hurt," he said simply. Taking the seat behind his desk, he leaned forward, his hands clasped. "And because I know you're lying." She flinched. "Who are you running from, Carla?" Her head snapped up. The question was a physical blow. I have to go." She stood up, knocking the chair back. The tea sat untouched. "Thank you, but I have to go." She fled his office, leaving him sitting in the silence, his jaw tight with a frustration that was rapidly turning to ice. As she hid in the staff locker room, her body shaking, the past she ran from came crashing back. It was always there, just beneath the surface, waiting for a moment of weakness. She wasn't just Carla Viscari. She had been Carla Romano, or she would have been, if he'd had his way. Her ex, Victor, hadn't just been abusive. He hadn't just been a man with a bad temper. He was part of the Romano family, a rival clan whose business was trafficking, extortion, and a level of violence that made Luca Moretti's operation look civilized. Victor had been charming at first, a whirlwind of gifts and promises. But the charm had quickly faded, revealing the monster beneath. It started with possessiveness, then insults, then a hand on her arm that was too tight. It ended with a night where he had broken 2 of her ribs for looking at another man at a restaurant. When she had tried to leave, he had laughed. He'd shown her a picture of her younger brother, Nico, playing in his schoolyard. "You go nowhere," he had hissed, his thumb stroking her bruised cheek. "You and the kid, you are mine." Nico. Her sweet, sensitive Nico. He had been a chatterbox, a bright, happy boy, until the day he had seen Victor hit her. Really hit her. The boy had screamed, and Victor, enraged at the interruption, had turned on him, backhanding the 7-year-old boy so hard he fell. Nico hadn't spoken a word since. Not one. That was the night she ran. She had waited until Victor was in a meeting. She had grabbed Nico, one small backpack with their emergency cash, less than $2,000, and their birth certificates. She had taken a bus, then a train, then another bus, until she was just one more desperate face in the sea of New York City. She had changed her last name, paid cash for the slum apartment, and taken 2 under-the-table jobs,
all to stay hidden, all to keep Nico safe. And now, Luca Moretti, a man who moved in the exact same world she had nearly died escaping, was looking at her. He was asking questions. His interest was not a kindness. It was a spotlight, and a spotlight would get her killed. That night, she went home. Her resolve hardened. She would be tougher. She would ignore Luca. She would find the money. She had to. But her hope evaporated when she saw the piece of paper tacked to her door. It was a handwritten note from Kozlov, the landlord. "I know you got a rich boyfriend now. I saw the car. Rent just went up. Double. And I want last night's money plus an inconvenience fee. $500. By tomorrow, or I'm changing the locks." Her knees buckled. $500. You might as well have asked for $1 million. She went to her second job, a greasy spoon diner in the next neighborhood over. She worked a 6-hour shift on her aching hip, the plates feeling like they weighed 100 pounds. At the end of the night, she cornered her boss, a balding man named Sal, a different, pathetic Sal, who reeked of cheap cigars. "Sal, please, I need an advance. Just $200. I'll work it off. I'll do doubles all next week." He looked her up and down, his eyes lingering on her chest. "I'm not a bank, sweetheart," he said, taking a long drag on his cigar. "But maybe we could work something else out." He reached out and touched her hair. Carla recoiled, bile rising in her throat. She said nothing. She just turned and walked out, her last shred of hope gone. She walked back to her apartment building, her mind a blank, howling void. She had nothing, no options, no way out. When she entered the dim, buzzing stairwell, he was there. Kozlov. He was waiting for her on the first-floor landing, blocking her way, a half-empty bottle of vodka in his hand. "So," he slurred, his small eyes gleaming, "you got my money?" "Please," she whispered, her back already against the filthy, peeling wall. "I don't have it. I need more time." "Time's up," he growled. He shoved the bottle into his pocket and took a step up, crowding her. The smell of cheap vodka and stale sweat washed over her. "But I'm a reasonable man." He reached out, his thick, dirty fingers fumbling for the top button of her thin jacket. "You can pay the other way. The personal way." Carla let out a choked sob, shoving at his chest, but it was like pushing a wall of stone. "No, get off me." "A little late for that," he snarled, grabbing her wrist, his other hand fumbling with his belt. She screamed, a raw, terrified, animal sound that tore from her throat, and then he was gone. It happened so fast, Carla's mind couldn't even process it. 1 second, Kozlov was on her, his weight pressing her into the wall. The next, he was ripped backward, as if by a hurricane. Luca Moretti stood in the entryway, his face a mask of such cold, pure rage that it was more terrifying than Kozlov's drunken lust. He had Kozlov by the collar, lifting the heavier man half off his feet. Get off me!" Kozlov sputtered, trying to swing his free arm. Luca didn't flinch. He didn't block the punch. He simply moved inside it, his other hand shooting out and gripping Kozlov's attacking wrist. There was a wet, sickening snap that echoed in the small stairwell. Kozlov shrieked, a high-pitched, agonized sound. Luca was silent. He slammed Kozlov's head back against the concrete wall, once. Twice. The landlord's eyes rolled back. Luca hit him in the throat, cutting off his scream, then drove a vicious knee into his ribs. Kozlov collapsed, a wheezing, bloody heap on the cracked linoleum floor. The entire thing had taken less than 5 seconds. It was not a fight. It was an execution. Carla was pressed flat against the wall, her hands over her mouth, her entire body shaking so violently she thought her bones might come apart. Luca stood over the groaning man, adjusting the cuffs of his dark suit jacket. He was breathing hard, but not from exertion, from rage. He looked at Kosla, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "If you ever look at her again, if you ever breathe in her direction again, I will not just break your bones, I will end you. Do you understand me?" Kozlov, clutching his shattered wrist, his face a mask of blood and terror, nodded frantically. Luca turned to Carla. The rage in his eyes was still there, a banked, burning fire, but his voice was low.
Get your brother! The command snapped her out of her frozen terror. No, she cried, her voice hysterical. No, what have you done? You can't be here. You don't understand. She was weeping now, her fear of Kozlov replaced by a far greater, more existential dread. He'll talk. People like him, they talk, and people like you, you'll bring them. They'll find us. You've killed us. You've killed us both. Luca's face was granite. He won't talk, he said, his promise absolute. I'm not asking. Carla, go upstairs, get your brother and get his things. You have 5 minutes. She tried to argue, to plead, but the look in his eyes told her it was useless. This man was not offering. He was commanding. She had no choice. She had never had a choice. She stumbled up the stairs, her mind reeling. She burst into the apartment. Nico was huddled in the corner, his eyes wide, having heard the scream. She didn't explain, she couldn't. She just grabbed his school backpack, shoved a few changes of clothes into it, grabbed her own purse, and took his small hand. We have to go, baby, we have to go right now. She led him down the stairs, averting her eyes from the whimpering, broken man on the floor. Luca was waiting, holding the front door open. He led them out into the rainy night, to the same black, predatory sedan. He opened the back door, his hand gently, impersonally on Nico's back, guiding him in. Carla slid in after him, her body numb. He drove them over the Brooklyn Bridge, the city lights a blur of neon and rain through her tear-filled eyes. He pulled up to a nondescript, impossibly clean brownstone in a quiet, tree-lined street in Brooklyn Heights. He led them inside, up to a penthouse apartment. It was smaller than his, but still luxurious. All warm woods, soft fabrics, and clean lines. No one knows I own this, he said, his voice quiet in the warm space. Not my staff, not my family, no one. You're safe here. Carla just stood in the entryway, clutching Nico's hand, shaking. Safe. He'd used that word. She hadn't been safe in 3 years. She didn't know what it meant. Nico, however, slowly let go of her hand. His eyes were fixed on Luca. He wasn't afraid. He was curious. Luca looked at the small, silent boy. Then he nodded toward the kitchen. I imagine neither of you has eaten. Carla watched, bewildered, as this man, this killer, this mafia boss, walked into the pristine kitchen, opened the fully stocked refrigerator, and took out eggs, bread, and a carton of orange juice. He rolled up the sleeves of his expensive shirt, revealing powerful, lightly tanned forearms, and began to cook. He made scrambled eggs, buttery toast, and poured 2 glasses of juice. He set them on the small, polished wooden table. Eat, he said. He pulled out a chair for Carla, then for Nico. Nico, to her utter shock, walked to the table, climbed into the chair, and looked at Luca. Luca slid the plate in front of him. It's just eggs, kid. Nico picked up the fork and, after a moment's hesitation, took a small bite. Carla finally sat, her legs giving out. Luca placed the other plate in front of her. Eat, Carla, he said, his voice gentle now. You need your strength. She picked up her own fork, her hand shaking, the simple, domestic act, coming on the heels of such brutal violence, was too much for her. She began to cry, silent, racking sobs that shook her entire frame. Luca didn't touch her. He just stood there, his hand resting on the back of her chair, a solid, unmoving presence, until she was finished. Later. Much later. Nico was asleep on the plush sofa, wrapped in a cashmere throw blanket. Carla found Luca on the small, enclosed balcony, staring out at the rain-slicked city. Why? She asked, her voice raw. Why are you doing this? He didn't turn. He just watched the lights. Because I know what it's like, he said, his voice a low gravel. To be afraid, to have nothing. He was quiet for a long moment. I grew up not far from here. My mother, she worked 3 jobs. My father was gone before I was born. Just another ghost in the system. I was 12 years old the first time I saw a man killed, right on my street corner for $200. He finally turned to look at her, his eyes dark with the memory. I learned 2 things that day. First, that weakness is a death sentence, and second, that I would never, ever be weak again,
And I would never let anyone. I was responsible for be weak either. The raw, unguarded confession hung in the air between them. It was more intimate than a touch. It was a piece of his soul, offered in the dark. She hadn't realized how close she had moved. She was standing just a foot from him, her arms wrapped around herself. A strand of her hair finally escaped from its bun, blew across her cheek. He lifted his hand. He moved so slowly, as if approaching a terrified animal, giving her every chance to bolt. His fingers, the same strong, capable fingers that had just destroyed a man, gently, impossibly gently, brushed the wisp of hair from her skin. His knuckles grazed her cheekbone. The touch was electric, a jolt of warmth that shot straight to her core. It was tender. It was possessive. It was the softest thing she had felt in years, and it terrified her. She flinched, a sharp, ragged intake of breath, and stumbled back a step. The spell was shattered. Luca's hand dropped instantly. A mask of self-reproach slammed down, the vulnerability gone, replaced by the cool, controlled boss. I can't, she whispered, her voice breaking. He nodded once, sharp and curt, turning back to the city. Get some rest. Carla, you're safe tonight, I promise. He stayed on the balcony, a solitary figure in the dark, leaving her to retreat into the safety of the apartment. She was not ready. She might never be. But as she locked the bedroom door, she knew, with a certainty that chilled and thrilled her, that her old life was over. Luca Moretti had stepped in, and he would not be letting go. The safe house in Brooklyn Heights was a bubble of impossible quiet. For the first 2 days, Carla moved through it as she had the penthouse, a ghost in borrowed clothes. The apartment was beautiful, filled with soft light and rich textures, but it felt like a luxurious prison, a cage she had been placed in by a man she couldn't understand. Her emotions were a tangled, violent knot. She was deeply, overwhelmingly grateful for the safety, for the food in the refrigerator, for the absence of a thudding fist on the door. But a sharp, bitter guilt ate at her. She had traded one master for another. She was terrified of needing Luca, of the debt she was incurring, and she was attracted to him. That was the most confusing, most terrifying part. She hated the violence she'd seen, the cold, lethal precision with which he'd dispatched Kozlov. It reminded her too much of Victor, but it had been for her. The protective rage in his eyes had been aimed at her enemy, and the tenderness that followed, the way he'd cooked for Nico, the gentleness in his voice, was a poison she was desperate to drink. Luca did not stay, but he came by. Once a day. Sometimes he brought groceries, sometimes a new set of sketchbooks for Nico. He never stayed long, and he never pressed her. He would sit in the living room, drinking an espresso, and ask quiet, impersonal questions. Did the thermostat work? Is there anything you need? He was, for the most part, formal, but his eyes were always on her, a heavy, possessive gaze that made her skin hum. On the 4th day, the impossible happened. Luca was on the floor in the living room, a place he looked absurdly large and out of place. He had brought a simple set of wooden building blocks and was quietly stacking them into a tower, his large, scarred hands moving with surprising delicacy. Nico was watching him from the far side of the couch, his knees tucked to his chest, his small face a mask of wary curiosity. Carla was in the kitchen, pretending to wipe down the already spotless counters, her entire nervous system aware of the man in the next room. I think this tower needs one more, Luca said, his voice a low rumble. He held up a red block. But maybe it should go on this side. He moved to place it, then paused. No, maybe here. He wasn't talking to Nico, not directly. He was just thinking aloud. He held up a blue block, then a red one. From across the room, a tiny, rusty voice cut through the silence. Blue. Carla's hand spasmed. The glass she was holding slipped from her fingers and shattered in the sink. She spun around, her heart stopping in her chest. Nico was pointing. His small finger was aimed at the blue block in Luca's hand. Luca had frozen. His back was to her, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. He didn't look at Carla. He didn't look at the shattered glass. He slowly, deliberately, turned his gaze to the small boy. Carla's hands flew to her mouth. A sob caught in her throat. "Nico?" she whispered, the name a fragile, broken prayer. "Baby?" Nico looked at her, his eyes wide, as if surprised by the sound of his own voice. Then he looked back at Luca. He pointed again, more firmly this time. "Blue," he said. The word was clearer, more confident. Tears streamed down Carla's face. 3 years. 3 years of doctors, of therapists, of her own desperate, nightly pleas. 3 years of agonizing silence, all broken by a Mafia boss with a set of wooden blocks. Luca slowly placed the blue block on the tower. He picked up the red one. "And this one?" Luca asked, his voice impossibly soft. Nico paused. "Red." Carla sank to her knees, her legs giving out, the sound of her brother's voice, a sound she thought she might never hear again, was a miracle. And it was a miracle delivered by the most dangerous man she had ever met. Her fear, her gratitude, her attraction, it all coalesced into a single, terrifying thought. She was no longer just his responsibility. She was, in some way she couldn't yet define, his. The fragile peace shattered 2 nights later. Luca was there, using the apartment as a temporary office while he made a series of quiet, tense phone calls. He thought Carla and Nico were in the back bedroom, reading, but Carla was in the hallway, grabbing a spare blanket. When she heard him, his business voice was back, the one that was cold as ice. "I don't care about rumors, Sal," Luca was saying, his back to the door. He was staring out the window, a phone pressed to his ear. "Gossip is for old women." There was a tinny squawk from the phone. Luca's shoulders tensed. "What did you say?" Another pause. "Victor Romano," Luca said, and the name was a curse. Carla froze. The blanket clutched to her chest. Her blood ran cold. The air in her lungs turned to glass. "This is solid," Luca said, his voice low and dangerous. "He's putting out feelers, big money, looking for a girl. His girl, he says, one who ran off 3 years back. He got a tip she might be in the city." Carla's vision tunneled. The walls of the beautiful apartment seemed to be breathing, closing in on her. "He knows. He's looking. He's here." "Find out what he knows," Luca commanded. "Find out who's talking. I want a name, and I want to know everywhere Romano has been for the last 48 hours. He hung up. The silence that fell was heavier, more suffocating than any noise. He stood at the window for a long minute. He knew she was there. He must have heard her sharp intake of breath, but he didn't turn. Carla didn't make a sound. She backed away, step by silent step, into the bedroom. She closed the door. She was shaking. This wasn't safety, this was a spotlight. She had taken her tiny, hidden, terrified life, and she had tied it to one of the biggest, most visible figures in the underworld. She hadn't just endangered herself. She had painted a massive, blood-red target on Nico, on Luca, on all of them. She waited. She waited for hours. Listening to the silence of the apartment, she heard Luca finally move to the living room, heard the soft click of a light being turned off. She waited until the digital clock on the bedside table read 3:15 in the morning, with the stealth of a field mouse. She got out of bed. She gently shook Nico awake. "Shh, baby," she whispered, her voice trembling. "We have to go. It's a game. We have to be very, very quiet." He was still half asleep, his newfound voice dormant. He just nodded, his trust in her absolute. She slipped his small jacket on, grabbed the one meager backpack she had packed the day she fled Victor, and took his hand. She opened the bedroom door, wincing at the tiny squeak of the hinges. The living room was dark. She made it across the floor, to the hallway, to the front door. Her hand was on the deadbolt, her fingers slowly, silently, turning the lock. "And where do you think you're going?" The voice came from the darkness beside her. Carla screamed, a small, choked sound, and spun around, yanking Nico behind her. Luca was sitting in an armchair in the entryway, a dark shadow in the deeper darkness. He had been waiting for her. He knew she would run. "Let us go," she hissed, her voice a desperate whisper. She pushed Nico behind her legs, shielding him with her body. "Go where? Carla?
Back to the street? Back to men like Kozlov? He rose from the chair. He was a mountain of shadow, a wall of muscle and anger between her and the door. Or were you going to run straight back to him? That is not your concern, she cried, her voice breaking. You've done enough. You don't understand. You've killed us. You've killed us both. Then make me understand. He was calm. His calmness was 1,000 times more terrifying than any rage. Make me understand why the name Victor Romano makes you look like you've seen a ghost. The name, spoken by him in the dark, shattered her control. You heard, she sobbed. I heard, he said, his voice dangerously soft. He's looking for you. He'll kill you, she shrieked, all pretense of quiet gone. Men like him, they don't just argue. They don't just fight, they erase. They'll kill you for being in the same room with me. And then they'll take Nico. And they'll... She couldn't say it. The old, cold fear was a gag in her throat. They'll what? Carla. He took a step closer, and she took one back, her spine hitting the solid wood of the door. What did he do to you? The dam of 3 years of silence, of running, of abject terror finally broke. He's not just an ex-boyfriend, she wept, the words tumbling out. He's a monster. He owns people. He broke 3 of my ribs because I smiled at a waiter. He told me he loved the way I bruised. Luca's face hardened, turning to granite. And Nico, he's the reason Nico doesn't talk. My brother saw him. He saw him hit me, and my baby brother screamed, and Victor hit him. The admission was a rip in her soul. He hit a child, and he laughed. He told me that was the price for my disobedience. He told me if I ever left him, he would find me. He would find Nico, and he would cut my brother's throat right in front of me, and then he'd start. She was hysterical, her hands balled into fists, pounding on the hard wall of his chest. And now you, with your money and your violence and your questions. You've put a beacon on us. We are dead. We are already dead. She collapsed against him, all her strength gone, sobbing into his shirt. He didn't move. He let her hit him. He let her scream. He just stood there, his hands at his sides, taking the full force of her terror and her grief. When she was finally spent, her body just a shaking, weeping mass, he finally moved. His hands came up, not gently, but with a bruising, possessive force. Gripping her upper arms, he hauled her upright, forcing her to look at him. His eyes were not soft, they were not kind, they were black, bottomless pits of a rage so cold it burned. You're right, he said, his voice a lethal, low vibration that shook her to her bones. I didn't understand. He pulled her closer, his grip like steel. But I understand now. He looked past her, at the small, terrified, silent boy huddled by the door. He is a dead man. I will find Victor Romano, and I will tear him apart, piece by piece. No, she cried, finding one last shred of strength. Whoa, you can't. It's not your fight. You'll start a war. His eyes flashed, a spark of pure fire in the dark. Not my fight, he snarled, his voice dropping to a possessive growl that vibrated through her. You are living in my safe house. You are under my protection. That boy, the one he hit, is speaking again because I am here. He leaned in, his face inches from hers. The power rolling off him was suffocating, primal. He put his hands on you. He hurt your brother. He made you afraid. His voice was a bare whisper, but it was the loudest sound she had ever heard. No one touches what's mine. The words hung in the air. What's mine? It was the same language Victor had used, the language of ownership. A shiver of pure, cold alarm ran down her spine, but beneath it, a strange, dark warmth pooled in her stomach, coming from Victor. It had been a threat, coming from Luca, backed by the absolute, deadly promise in his eyes. It felt like a vow, a terrifying, unbreakable shield. He took a sharp breath, as if pulling his own rage back under control. He let go of her arms. Take Nico, he said. His voice clipped and back to business. Go back to the bedroom. Lock the door. You are not going anywhere. Carla was too shaken to argue.
She was boneless, her adrenaline gone, leaving only a hollow, echoing fear. She grabbed Nico's hand and did as she was told. She lay in the dark, her heart hammering against her ribs. She was not a guest. She was a possession. She was not safe. She was protected. The distinction was critical. She could not sleep. The apartment was deathly quiet. Hours passed. 1 in the morning, 2, 3. She could feel him out there in the living room, a sentinel of quiet fury. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. She slid out of bed, her bare feet silent on the thick rug. She unlocked the bedroom door. The living room was dark, lit only by the electric glow of the city skyline. Luca was exactly where she'd pictured him.
He was standing on the balcony, the door open, the cool night air rolling in. His suit jacket and tie were gone. His white shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, the sleeves rolled up his powerful forearms. A half-empty bottle of whiskey and a single, heavy crystal tumbler sat on the small table beside him. He was drinking in silence, brooding. He heard her. He didn't turn. "You should be asleep. So should you." Her voice was a small thing, easily swallowed by the night. She walked out onto the balcony, pulling the thin cotton robe she'd found in the closet tighter around her. She sat in the chair opposite him, a small, vulnerable figure in the face of his coiled anger. The silence stretched, filled only by the distant sound of a siren. "He won't find you," Luca said finally. His voice was rough with whiskey and controlled rage. "You don't know that," she whispered, staring at her hands. "I do." He finally looked at her, his dark eyes unreadable. "My world has rules, Carla." He broke them. He put his hands on a woman under another's protection. "He just doesn't know you're protected yet." "Protected," she repeated, the word tasting like ash. Or owned? The question hung between them, stark and painful. He looked at her for a long, heavy moment. He swirled the amber liquid in his glass. "Does it matter?" he asked, his voice low. "If it keeps you safe?" "Yes," she whispered, her eyes filling with tears. "It matters to me." He nodded once. Slowly, he put the glass down. He stood, and for a heart-stopping second, she thought he was going to walk away. Instead, he walked over to her. He crouched in front of her chair, bringing him eye level. He was so close. She could smell the sharp, peaty scent of the scotch, the clean, expensive scent of his soap, the unique, masculine scent that was just him. He didn't touch her. "I am not him, Carla," he said, his voice raw. "I am not Victor." "You're like him," she accused, a tear escaping and tracking down her cheek. "You use violence. You liked hurting Kozlov." "No," he said, his voice flat and absolute. "I liked stopping him. There's a difference." He was so close. His gaze was intense, unwavering, as if he was trying to see straight into her soul. "I am so tired," she whispered, the admission torn from her. "I'm so tired of being afraid. I know." His hand came up. He moved with agonizing slowness, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. She was frozen. His thumb, calloused and warm, brushed the tear from her cheek. The touch was electric. "No one," he murmured, "should have to live like that." His fingers threaded into her hair, cupping the back of her head, his palm warm against her scalp. His touch was so gentle, so full of a strength he was deliberately restraining. Her eyes fluttered closed. "You are strong," he whispered, his voice thick. "Stronger than any man I know." He leaned in. His lips brushed hers, a feather-light touch. It was a question, not a demand. A small, broken sound escaped her throat. She leaned into him, a tiny, fractional movement that was all the answer he needed. He kissed her. It was hesitant at first, a soft, searching pressure, a simple sharing of breath. It was chaste. It was tender. It was a promise. But beneath that tenderness, a dark, powerful current was building. She let out another shaky breath, and her hands came up, gripping the front of his shirt. That small, desperate sound broke his iron control. The kiss changed. It deepened. It became hungry. His other hand came up, framing her jaw, tilting her head. His mouth opened over hers, possessive, consuming, exploring. It was not gentle anymore.
It was raw, desperate need. It was all the words he couldn't say. All the promises he'd made. It was all his rage, all his protection, all his focus, centered on her. And she was kissing him back. Her fear, her gratitude, her attraction, her desperation, it all melted into one undeniable, shattering thing: want. For the first time in years, she wasn't a victim. She was a woman. His hand slid from her jaw, down her neck, his thumb tracing the sharp line of her collarbone, finding the sensitive, new skin just below. He brushed against the deep, fading bruise Kozlov had left. Carla gasped, a sharp, sudden intake of breath, and flinched, her body instinctively recoiling. It wasn't the kiss, it was the sharp, sudden jolt of pain. Luka froze. He pulled back instantly, as if he'd been slapped, his eyes, dark and dilated with passion just a second before, dropped to her collarbone. He could see the dark, ugly mark on her skin in the dim light of the balcony. His face contorted. The passion was gone, replaced by a deep, agonizing, visceral shame. He looked at the bruise, then at his own hands, the hands that had just held her, the hands that had done violence just days before. He was the one who hurt her. No, Kozlov had, but he was no different. He was a man of violence. The thought was etched on his features. He stood up abruptly, turning his back to her, and ran a shaking hand through his hair. "I'm sorry," he bit out. His voice choked. I didn't... I'm sorry." The controlled, all-powerful Luca Moretti was gone, replaced by a man who looked ashamed of his own hands. Luca. She stood up behind him, her own body trembling. He didn't turn. He just stared out at the city, his shoulders rigid. She did something she never in a million years thought she would have the courage to do. She stepped up behind him. She wrapped her arms around his waist, pressing her cheek against the hard, warm muscle of his back. He was rigid, a statue of self-loathing. "It wasn't you," she whispered into his shirt. "You didn't hurt me." He let out a long, shuddering breath, the tension leaving him in a rush. Slowly, he turned within her loose embrace. His hands came up, not to hold her, but to cover hers where they were clasped at his stomach. He didn't kiss her again. He didn't try. He just pulled her against his chest, tucking her head under his chin, and held her. His arms were a fortress, caging her in. But this time, it didn't feel like a prison. It was a sanctuary. It wasn't passionate. It was something deeper. It was comfort. It was a promise. It was peace. They stood like that for a long time, two broken people in the dark, with the lights of New York City glittering below them. "You don't have to be afraid anymore," he whispered into her hair, his voice rough. And for the first time in 3 long, desperate years, she closed her eyes and, God help her, she believed him. The new day in the Brooklyn safe house dawned with a tension so thick Carla felt she could hardly breathe. That single, hesitant, shattering kiss on the balcony and her instinctive, pained flinch had changed everything. The charged silence of the night had been broken, and now a new, humming silence had taken its place. She found Luca on the sofa, his long frame looking cramped and uncomfortable. He'd not gone home. He'd slept there, a guardian at the gate, while she and Nico were locked in the bedroom. He was already awake, dressed in the same dark suit from yesterday. Though it was now rumpled, he was staring at the blank television screen, a cold cup of coffee in his hand. "Good morning," she whispered from the hallway. He looked up. His eyes were shadowed, his jaw tight with a tension that had nothing to do with sleep. The raw vulnerability from last night, the shame he'd shown, was gone. The mask was back, but she could see the cracks in it. "Morning," he said, his voice a low gravel. "I had Sal bring up bagels. There's juice for Nico." He was all business. He was the boss. But his gaze kept straying to her, to the faint, fading bruise on her collarbone, and then quickly away, as if the sight of it physically pained him. She tried to act normal. She poured juice for Nico, who was now chattering quietly, pointing at birds on the windowsill. The sound of his small, hesitant voice was a constant miracle, and it was aimed at Luca. Man here. Yes, baby. Luca's here, Carla said, her stomach twisting. A new, unspoken language existed between them. A brushed hand as she reached for a plate was no longer an accident. It was a jolt of electricity. A shared glance over Nico's head was freighted with the memory of shared breath, of his lips on hers, of the promise that had been made and then broken by the past. The apartment, once a sanctuary, now felt impossibly small, charged with hesitation and a deep, unspoken longing. The fragile bubble burst just before noon. Luca's phone, the one he used for business, rang. He answered it, his voice clipped. What? He listened, his body going utterly still. Carla, who was wiping down the kitchen counter, watched his reflection in the dark glass of the oven. Say that again, he commanded. He listened. The muscle in his jaw clenched so hard she thought it might break. He has a name? Her old name? Carla's hand froze. The dish rag fell from her fingers. He's using her former identity, Luca said. More to himself than to Sal on the phone. Carla Romano. He's put a picture out, an old one. He's offering $50,000 for any information. He knows she's in New York. He hung up without saying goodbye. The silence in the room was absolute. Victor, Carla breathed, her voice a reedy, terrified whisper. He knows. Luca turned to her. His face was a mask of cold, controlled fury. The time for the safe house, the time for hiding, was over. Pack your things, he said. His voice was flat, devoid of all emotion. You and the boy. She backed away, her hands finding the counter, gripping it. What? Where? Where are we going? Are you sending us away? A small, dark, terrible part of her had been waiting for this. She was too much trouble. She was a liability. He crossed the room in 3 long strides. He stopped just short of her, not touching her. But his proximity was a physical force, a wall of heat and power. Let me make one thing clear, he said, his voice low and dangerous. You are not going anywhere without me. He put a price on your head. He thinks he can just buy you. He thinks you're a thing. But Luca, you are not safe here anymore. No one knew about this place, but he's not looking for this place. He's looking for you. I can't have eyes here 24 hours a day. I can't protect you if I can't see you. So what are you saying? You're coming back to the penthouse, both of you. Her heart hammered against her ribs. No, I can't. The staff, I was a maid. Luca, I can't be your guest. They'll look at me. They'll whisper. Let them whisper, he snarled. Their opinions are air. Your life is not. You are not a maid anymore. Carla, you are under my protection. That is all anyone needs to know. You will pack. Sal will take the bags. We are leaving in 5 minutes. He was not asking. This was not a negotiation. This was the cold, hard reality of his world. The return to the penthouse was a blur. This time, they did not use the service elevator. Luca led her and Nico straight through the building's opulent main lobby, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back. The doorman's eyes widened, but he said nothing. They rode the private elevator, the one that opened directly into his home. Mrs. Davies was in the grand salon, overseeing a delivery of flowers. She looked up as the elevator doors slid open. Her gaze was sharp. It took in Carla, in her simple, borrowed jeans and sweater. It took in Nico, clutching Carla's hand, and it took in Luca, his hand still firmly on Carla's back, guiding her forward. The housekeeper's professional mask did not slip, but her eyes, for one brief second, flashed with a mixture of shock and rapid calculation. Mrs. Davies, Luca said, his voice booming with authority in the vast, quiet space. This is Carla Viscari and her brother, Nico. He didn't say Carla from your staff. He acted as if they had never met. They will be my guests, indefinitely. Please have the South Guest Wing prepared for them at once. They are to have anything they need. Of course, Mr. Moretti. Mrs. Davies said, her voice perfectly level. Welcome, Miss Viscari. Thank you, Carla whispered, her cheeks burning.
It was worse than she could have imagined. The other maids, the women she had shared a locker room with, now averted their eyes. When they did look at her, their faces were a mixture of curiosity, envy, and a cool disdain. She was no longer one of them. She was the boss's new pet. The whispers followed her down the hall. She felt like a fraud. She retreated into the palatial guest wing, a suite of rooms larger than her entire Bronx apartment building. It was another cage, just a bigger, more gilded one. She pulled away from Luca emotionally. He would come to her in the evening, try to talk to her, but she would be distant, cold. She felt the eyes of his entire world on her, and she hated it. She was grateful, and she was miserable. A week later, Luca found her sitting in the vast, empty library, staring at the spines of books she was now forbidden to dust. "You've barely eaten in 2 days," he said from the doorway. "I'm not hungry," she replied, not looking at him. "You're angry." "I'm seen," she snapped, turning on him. "I'm a fish in a glass bowl. Your staff hates me. Your men look at me like I'm a prize you won. I'd rather be back in my old apartment fighting off Kozlov." "No, you wouldn't," he said, his voice quiet. "You'd just be more afraid. This will pass. They will get used to it. And what if I don't want to get used to it?" "It's Nico's birthday on Friday," he said, changing the subject so abruptly it gave her whiplash. She stared at him. "What? How did you know that?" "I had Sal retrieve your personal documents from your apartment, along with anything else of value. I saw his birth certificate. He'll be 9. "Yes," she said, her anger deflating, replaced by a dull sadness. "He'll be 9. Good." Luca turned to leave. "Be ready at 7. On Friday evening, Carla was on edge. She dressed herself and Nico in some of the new, simple clothes Luca had ordered for them. At 7 on the dot, Luca appeared. He wasn't in a suit. He wore dark jeans and a soft gray cashmere sweater. He looked normal. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice full of suspicion. "Up," he said. He led them to a staircase she hadn't known existed. It led to the rooftop. The moment she opened the door, she gasped. The private roof garden, normally a sterile, windswept place, had been transformed. Hundreds of tiny, warm string lights were draped over the dormant hedges, creating a canopy of soft light. In the center, a small table was set for 3, with a large, beautiful chocolate cake as its centerpiece. "Luca," she breathed, her hand flying to her chest. "Happy birthday, Nico," Luca said, his voice soft. Nico's eyes, usually so wary, were as wide as saucers. He walked forward, his small hand reaching out to touch a frosting rose. "Cake," he whispered, a huge, slow smile spreading across his face. Carla felt tears spring to her eyes. This man, this complicated, violent, tender man, had done this, not for her brother. "There's more," Luca said. He led them to the far corner of the roof, where a large, sleek, professional-grade telescope was aimed at the night sky. "Oh, my," Carla whispered. "I saw you with him, at the window in Brooklyn," Luca said to her. His gaze locked on her face. "You were pointing out the lights. I figured he should see them up close." He knelt beside Nico, his large frame crouching down to the boy's level. "Come here, kid. Let me show you." He lifted Nico up, positioning him at the eyepiece. "See that bright one? That's not a star. That's Jupiter." Carla watched them. The feared boss of the Moretti organization, his head bent close to her brother's. His voice a low, patient rumble as he explained the moons of a distant planet. And Nico gasped, a real, audible sound of pure, unadulterated wonder. And then Carla laughed. It was a sound she hadn't heard from herself in years. It was not a sad chuckle. It was a real, genuine, bubbling up from her soul laugh of pure joy. Luca's head turned. He stopped talking about the stars. His gaze fixed on her, and the raw, undisguised longing in his eyes was so intense it stole her breath. He was watching her as if she were the only thing in the sky. Later that night, long after Nico was asleep, his dreams full of planets and chocolate cake, Carla found herself pacing the guest wing. She was restless, her body thruming with an energy she didn't recognize. The night on the rooftop had broken down the last of her defenses. She couldn't hide from her feelings anymore. She couldn't hide from him. She left her room and went to his, the mezzanine study. He was there, as she knew he would be, a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring out at the city he owned. He heard her enter. He turned. "Thank you," she said, her voice shaking. "For Nico. What you did tonight. It was—" "He's a good kid," Luca said, his voice rough. "He deserved a birthday. It wasn't just for him," she said, taking a brave step closer. He put the glass down. "No," he admitted, his eyes dark and fixed on her. "It wasn't, I like seeing you smile. Carla, I like hearing you laugh." He met her in the middle of the room. The air between them was electric, a palpable, physical thing. This was not the hesitant, fearful dance in Brooklyn. This was an inevitability. "Luca," she whispered, and it was a plea. "I have tried," he said, his voice hoarse, "to stay away from you. I have tried to do the right thing, to just protect you. I don't want you to stay away," she confessed, her voice barely audible. That was all he needed. His hand came up, not to his, but to cup her jaw, his thumb brushing her lower lip. "You're sure?" he rasped. "After this, there's no going back." "I'm sure," she breathed. He kissed her. It was not a question. It was a drowning. It was a complete, willing surrender to a force she had stopped fighting. His mouth was warm, firm, and devastatingly sure. He consumed her, and she let him. Her hands came up, gripping his sweater, pulling him closer, her body arching into his. He groaned, a low, animal sound from deep in his chest. His other arm snaked around her waist, lifting her effortlessly, molding her body against his. She wasn't a fragile, broken thing. She was a woman, alive and wanting, and he was worshipping her with his mouth, with his hands. His touch was not rough, but it was absolute. It was possessive. His hands mapped the line of her spine, her waist, her hips, as if memorizing her. He broke the kiss only to press his mouth to the column of her throat, to the place where the bruise had been. He kissed the phantom pain, his lips a healing balm. "You are beautiful," he murmured against her skin, "and you are safe." He lifted her into his arms. She wrapped her legs around his waist, her arms around his neck, burying her face in the warm, clean scent of his skin. She was not afraid. For the first time in her life, in the arms of the most dangerous man she knew, she was completely, utterly safe. He carried her from the study, through the dark, silent penthouse, and into his bedroom. Not the guest wing, his. He laid her on the bed, his sheets cool and soft against her skin. The city lights glowed behind him, painting his silhouette in silver. He moved slowly, deliberately, his eyes never leaving hers. This was not a hurried, frantic act. It was a slow, reverent exploration. It was an emotional surrender for both of them. He was shedding his armor, and she was laying down her shield. His hands were a miracle. They were slow, lingering, and exquisitely gentle. He touched her as if she were made of priceless glass, and his gaze was full of a deep, aching tenderness that unraveled her. Every touch was a question, and her body answered with a resounding yes. She met his touch, her own hands exploring the hard, warm planes of his chest, the muscles in his shoulders, the faint, healed scar above his heart. They made love slowly, with deep, lingering looks and whispered words. It was a silent promise. It was a healing. When he finally made them one, it was a moment not of pain or fear, but of profound, earth-shattering belonging. She cried out his name, a sound of release, and he held her, his body trembling, as if she were his only anchor in a storm. The next morning, Carla woke to sunlight streaming through the massive windows. She was tangled in his sheets, in his arms. His heavy, muscular arm was draped possessively over her waist, his breathing a warm, steady presence against her back. She felt whole. She turned slowly, not wanting to wake him, but he was already awake, his dark eyes watching her. The hard, calculating boss was gone.
In his place was just a man, her man. He smiled, a slow, soft smile that was just for her. He leaned in and kissed her, a deep, lazy morning kiss that was full of the night's promises. "Good morning," he murmured against her lips, but the world would not be kept at bay. His phone, on the nightstand, buzzed. A text. Luca sighed, his body tensing. He glanced at it. The soft, relaxed man was gone in an instant. He sat up, his face hardening, the mask of the boss slamming back into place. "I have to go," he said. His voice clipped. "A meeting. Business." He got out of bed, and the change was jarring. He was all controlled power, dressing quickly in a dark suit, strapping a watch to his wrist. He looked like a predator. He looked like the man who had destroyed Kozlov. He turned to her. She was still in his bed, the sheets pooled around her waist. His gaze softened for just a second, but his voice was iron. "You do not leave this penthouse," he commanded. "For any reason, you do not go on the roof. You do not go near the main elevators. Sal will be outside the door of this suite. You stay with Nico, and you do not let anyone in who is not Sal. Do you understand me?" The fear was back, sharp and cold. This was not a request. "Luca." "What is it?" "It's Victor," he said, his jaw tight. "He's making a move. I have to handle it. Stay inside." He kissed her, hard and fast, a kiss of possession, and then he was gone. Carla was a nervous wreck. She spent the next 2 hours in the penthouse, trying to play blocks with Nico, but every sound made her jump. The silence of the huge apartment was deafening. Just before noon, she heard it, a sound so deep it was almost a feeling, a dull, heavy, sickening thump that vibrated through the floor. The massive windows of the penthouse rattled in their frames. Nico looked up, his eyes wide. Carla's heart stopped. The private elevator dinged. It was not supposed to move without Luca's key. She grabbed Nico, shoving him behind her, just as the doors slid open. Sal burst out, his face pale as chalk, his hand on his holstered weapon. "What was that?" Carla demanded. "Sal, what was that noise?" "Mr. Moretti," Sal panted, his eyes frantic. "There's been an incident at the garage downtown." "What incident?" she screamed, grabbing his arm. "Where is he?" "His car," Sal said, his voice cracking. It exploded, a bomb. He had just gotten out. He was clear, mostly, but... Ma'am, he's alive, but he's hurt. They're taking him to Lenox Hill." Carla's world evaporated. The man who had healed her, the man who had made her laugh, the man she had just given herself to. Gone. No, not gone. "Take me to him," she said, her voice a deadly calm. "Ma'am, I can't... It's not safe. The area is not secure." She slapped him, her hand cracked across his face, the sound sharp in the opulent room. "I don't care," she hissed, her eyes blazing with a fire he had never seen. "Take me to him. Now." The hospital was chaos. Luca's men, dark-suited and grim-faced, had locked down the entire emergency floor. Carla burst from the elevator, Sal on her heels. She saw him. He was on a gurney, surrounded by doctors, being rushed toward a trauma room. His suit was shredded, his face was black with soot, and blood was gushing from a deep gash on his arm. He was conscious, his face a tight mask of agony. "Luca!" she screamed, shoving a bodyguard out of her way. He heard her. His head turned, his eyes, hazy with pain, widened when he saw her. "Carla?" he rasped. "No. Sal, get her out of here. It's not safe. Even now. Even wounded." His first instinct was her. She reached him, grabbing his one good hand. "No," she cried, tears streaming down her face. "I'm not leaving you. Carla, you have to." "Don't you dare," she sobbed, clutching his hand as the doctors tried to push her away. "Don't you dare push me away. I'm not going anywhere. Do you hear me? I'm not going." They were in a private room hours later. He was stabilized. His left arm was in a heavy cast. He had a line of black stitches over his right eye. He looked broken, but he was alive. Carla sat by his bed, her own clothes stained with his blood. She had been refusing to leave, wiping the grime from his face with a damp cloth, her hand never letting go of his. "You," he croaked, his voice rough, You shouldn't be here. Shut up, she whispered, her voice thick with tears. Victor, this was him. He knew where I'd be. He wasn't just... He's trying to take me out. Let him try, she said, her voice fierce. She leaned forward, pressing her forehead to his good hand. I'm not afraid of him anymore. I'm afraid of this. I was so afraid I'd lost you. He looked at her. The tough, calculating Mafia boss completely gone. In his place was a man looking at the one thing in the world he couldn't bear to lose. When the bomb went off, he said, his voice hoarse, when I was on the ground, I didn't think about the business. I didn't think about Victor. He squeezed her hand, his gaze desperate and raw. I thought about you. I thought about you and Nico, alone in that penthouse. I can't think straight. Carla, when you're in danger, I can't focus. I need you near me, where I can see you. It was the most profound confession he could make. She was not his weakness. She was his anchor. She lifted her head, her eyes meeting his. She leaned in, past the wires and the cast, and kissed his bruised, chapped lips. Then I'm not going anywhere, she whispered. You're stuck with me. You saved my life. Luca, now let me save yours. He pulled her as close as he could, his good arm wrapping around her, holding her as if he'd never let go. The roles had changed. She was no longer just the maid he protected. She was the woman who held him together. The penthouse, once a symbol of cold, untouchable power, had transformed into a recovery ward. And Carla Vescari, once its most invisible servant, was now its unquestioned general. Luca's recovery was fast, his body, honed by a life of discipline, healed with a speed that amazed the private doctors. But it was Carla who orchestrated it. The woman who had flinched at a raised voice now snapped orders at housekeepers and bodyguards twice her size. He's not to be disturbed, she told Sal, who was now permanently stationed outside the master suite. No meetings, no calls, unless it's you telling me the building is on fire. Yes, ma'am, Sal replied, his respect for her absolute. Inside the room, she was a fierce, tender nurse. The roles had, in a stunning reversal, completely flipped. He was the one who was vulnerable, his left arm bound in a heavy black cast, the stitches over his eye a stark, angry red. She was the one who was strong, her fear burned away by the adrenaline of nearly losing him. You're a terrible patient, she murmured, dabbing an antiseptic on a cut on his temple. He had tried to get out of bed to take a call. He hissed as the antiseptic stung. I have a business to run. Carla, Victor just tried to blow me up. That is not a hint you ignore. You have a business to survive, she corrected him, her touch firm, unwavering. And you'll do that by healing. Now, lie back. He looked at her, truly looked at her. The haunted, bruised violet of her eyes was still there, but a new, protective fire burned in their depths. The woman who had been terrified of his world was now planting herself firmly in the middle of it, a lioness guarding her territory. He did as he was told. He lay back. The quiet domestic days were a strange, tense truce with the world. Nico, emboldened by Luca's wounded state, would bring him glasses of water, his small voice adding a simple, "Be careful."
It was on the third evening of this strange peace that Luca brought the world crashing back in. Carla was reading a story to Nico on the sofa, her voice soft in the dim light. Luca was in his armchair, his good hand drumming a restless rhythm on the armrest. We need to talk, he said. Carla looked up. His voice was the one he used for business. About Nico. He said. Her entire body went rigid. What about him? This, Luca gestured with his chin to his cast, was an escalation. Victor is not just sending messages anymore. He's taking pieces off the board. He knows Nico is here. He knows he's everything to you. That makes him a target, a liability. Carla flinched, the words stinging her. He's not a liability. He's my brother. To me, he's a boy I need to protect, Luca said, his voice softening. To Victor, he is leverage. The easiest way to control you or to hurt me. So what are you saying? She whispered, her hand tightening on Nico's shoulder. I have a place, a school, in Switzerland,
It's for the children of men like me. It's a fortress. It's inaccessible. They specialize in security, in privacy. He would be safe there. Completely. 100% safe. He could learn. He could be a child. Without this. He gestured again to the armed guard she could see, even now, standing on the balcony. No. The word was instant, torn from her throat. Absolutely not. You are not sending him away. I didn't save him from Victor just to ship him across the world like a package. Carla, listen to me. No, you listen, she said, standing up, her voice rising with a panic he hadn't heard since the Bronx. He's all I have. He just started talking again. I won't. You would put your pride, Luca said, his voice dangerously low. Your own fear of being alone, above his life? How dare you? Go, a small voice said. They both froze. They turned. Nico was standing, his small hands balled into fists at his sides. He looked at his sister, his eyes full of a wisdom that no 9-year-old should possess. Carla, he said, his voice clear and terribly, terribly adult. I want to go. Nico, baby, no. She wept, sinking to her knees in front of him. You don't know what you're saying. You don't have to. He hurt you, Nico said, his small hand coming up to touch her cheek. That man, Victor. He then looked at Luca, a man he now clearly trusted. And he hurt you. He pointed at Luca's cast. I'm not a liability. He had heard them. He had understood everything. If I go, Nico said, his small face a mask of determination. You stay safe. And he, Luca, can fight. He nodded once, a sharp, terrible little nod. I go. Carla collapsed, wrapping her arms around his small, brave body, her sobs echoing in the vast, silent room. Luca watched, his heart, which he'd long thought dead, breaking in two. He had done this. He had brought this war to their doorstep, and this small, brave boy was paying the price. The preparations were made with brutal efficiency, a new identity, a private jet. Within 48 hours, Nico was gone. Carla stood on the private tarmac, holding his hand until the very last second, her face a mask of forced, agonizing calm. She had not cried, not in front of him. She returned to the penthouse, and it was no longer a home. It was a tomb. It was silent. She walked into Nico's empty room and finally allowed herself to break. Luca found her there hours later, curled on the small bed, weeping into the pillow. He didn't say anything. He just sat on the edge of the bed, his presence a heavy, comforting weight, and waited. You were right, she whispered, her voice choked. It was the only way. I know, he said. She sat up, wiping her eyes. The grief was still there, but the fire from the hospital had returned. He's safe. Now, you find Victor. You find him, and you end this. You end him. He looked at her, surprised by the cold fury in her voice. I will. He promised. I'm not afraid of him anymore, she said, more to herself than to him, but I'm afraid of something else. What? She looked at him, her gaze raw and vulnerable. I'm afraid of this, of being this. The woman you keep, the liability. She spat the word. I felt safe with you, safer than I have ever felt, but in your world, safety isn't free. What's the price? Luca, when does this stop being protection, and when does it become owning me? He stared at her, the accusation striking him harder than the bomb. He had taken her from one cage, brutal and poor, and put her in another, gilded and silent. He'd just sent her brother away. He thought he was saving her, but he was merely changing her chains. He stood up and walked out of the room. Carla's heart sank. She had pushed him too far. She had insulted him. He was a man who demanded loyalty, and she had just questioned his motives. He returned a minute later. In his good hand, he was holding a single, small silver key. He held it out to her. She looked at it, confused. What is this? It's the key to the main elevator, he said, his voice flat. The private one. It's also a key to the building's front door.
And the garage. It's your key. Sal has one. I have one. And now you have one. She just stared at it, not taking it. He sighed, his frustration not with her, but with himself. He closed her small, trembling hand around the cold metal. This is not a prison, Carla. I am not Victor. I don't understand, she whispered. You're free to go, he said, his voice rough with an emotion she couldn't place. You can walk out that door, right now. You can get on a plane. I'll have Sal arrange it. You can go to Nico. You can go anywhere you want. You are not my prisoner. You were never my prisoner. He looked away, his jaw working. I just hope you don't. She looked at the key in her palm. It was small. It was light. And it was the heaviest thing she had ever held. It was not a chain. It was a choice. He was giving her the one thing no one, not Victor, not Kozlov, not the world, had ever offered her. She closed her fist around it. She stood up, her eyes never leaving his. You're right, she said. You're not him. She walked forward, rose on her toes, and kissed him. It was not a kiss of passion or of grief. It was a kiss of partnership. It was a promise. I'm not going anywhere, she whispered. This war is coming, and I'm staying right here, with you. The weeks that followed were the calm before the storm. Luca, his arm now in a sling, resumed control of his empire, but everything was different. Their relationship, forged in violence and cemented by choice, deepened. They fell into a soft, domestic routine that felt alien and precious to both of them. They woke together. She would make coffee, her hand brushing his as he reached for a mug. He would work from the mezzanine study, and she would sit in the library below, reading, the simple, quiet presence of the other in the next room a profound comfort. They ate dinner together every night, not the formal, staged meal on the rooftop, but simple meals they cooked together in the massive kitchen. He'd chop vegetables with his good hand, and she'd tease him about his technique, and he would laugh, a real, deep laugh that she had never heard before. It was a stolen, beautiful, normal life, lived in the eye of a hurricane. The hurricane was named Marco Rinaldi. Marco was Luca's second cousin, an associate who had always believed his bloodline entitled him to more than his talent earned him. He had watched Luca's rise with a simmering, jealous resentment, and he had watched Carla's. He saw this former maid, this nothing, captivating the man he was supposed to emulate. The bombing, in Marco's eyes, was proof. Luca had gone soft. He had taken his eye off the ball. All for a woman who had been Victor Romano's. It was an insult to the family, and it was an opportunity. While Luca was in a meeting, re-establishing his control, Marco was in a back alley using a burner phone. He's still recovering, Marco whispered into the phone, his eyes darting around the alley. He's weak, and he's distracted. She's with him, always, in the penthouse. A gravelly voice on the other end said, "The penthouse is a fortress. It's impossible." "Nothing is impossible," Marco sneered. "I'm his family. I can override the security protocols from the inside, for a price. You tell Romano. I can get him his girl. All I want is what's mine. I want Luca's chair." The deal was struck. That night, Luca was out. A late, unavoidable meeting with the heads of the other families, a summit to prove he was still in command, that his war with Romano was his alone and would not spill over. "I'll be back by midnight," he promised Carla, kissing her. The kiss was deep, possessive, and tinged with a worry he couldn't hide. "Sal and 3 other men are on our floor. The elevator is locked to my key only. You are safer here than in Fort Knox." "Be careful," she whispered. She was in the grand salon, curled on the sofa, trying to read. The penthouse was too quiet. The silence pressed in on her. At 10:17, the power cut out. The entire penthouse, the lights, the ambient noise of the city, the security panels, went black and silent. It lasted for only a second, and then the emergency generators kicked in, bathing the apartment in a dim, eerie red emergency light. But in that 1 second of blackness, she'd heard it, the ding of the private elevator, the one that was locked. Sal, from the hallway, shouted, "Ma'am, get to the panic room, now!" Then, the gunfire started. It was not a pistol, it was automatic weapons, a deafening, thunderous sound that tore the opulent silence to shreds. Carla didn't hesitate. Her only thought, Nico. But Nico was gone. He was safe. Her next thought, me. Victor wanted me. She ran, not to the panic room. She knew they would look for her there. She ran toward the service stairs, the ones she used to use as a maid. She heard a body fall in the hall, a heavy, final thud. She yanked the service door open and plunged into the dark stairwell. She flew down 2 flights, her heart trying to beat its way out of her chest. She burst into the kitchen, a shortcut to the rear exit, and 3 men were there, dressed in black tactical gear, sweeping the room. She screamed. One of them lunged, grabbing her. She fought, kicking, scratching, biting. She was not the same girl from the Bronx. She fought like a cornered animal. It took all 3 of them to subdue her. One of them clamped a hand over her mouth, his other arm like a steel band around her waist, lifting her off the floor. "We have her," the man grunted into a radio. "Package is secure." She was dragged, kicking, back toward the elevator, her eyes wide with a terror that was sickeningly familiar. Luca arrived at 10:40. The meeting had felt wrong. A gnawing, visceral panic had been clawing at his gut for the last hour. He cut the meeting short. The elevator doors opened. The red emergency lights were still on, casting the entire penthouse in the color of blood. It was silent. A thick, metallic smell hung in the air. He saw Sal first, his best man, his most loyal friend. He was slumped against the wall, his eyes open and lifeless, his chest a ruin of bullet holes. "Carla?" Luca's voice was a dead thing. He walked through his home. Carnage. His guards, 4 of them, were dead. They had fought, but they had been ambushed. Outgunned. "Carla!" he roared, his voice breaking. He ran to the guest wing, to Nico's old room, empty. He ran to his bedroom, empty. He ran to the panic room, punching in the code. It was empty. He stood in the center of the grand salon, surrounded by the bodies of his men, in the red-lit ruins of his home. And she was gone. A sound. A low, pathetic, gurgling sound. Marco Rinaldi, his cousin. He was slumped in the hallway, clutching his side, a dark pool of blood spreading from under his hand. He'd been shot. "Boss," Marco gurgled, his face a mask of fake agony. They came out of nowhere. I tried to stop them. They took her. It was Romano's men. I heard them." Luca looked at him. He looked at the bodies of his men, shot in the chest and head, and he looked at Marco, clutching a neat, clean flesh wound in his side. A survivor's wound, the rage that Luca had held in check for weeks, the cold, calculated anger, did not just break, it evaporated. It was replaced by something white-hot and absolute, a pure, nihilistic void of fury. He didn't say a word. He reached down with his good hand, grabbed Marco by his bloody shirt, and hauled him to his feet. Marco screamed as the movement tore his wound. "Boss, I'm hit. It's bad." Luca dragged him, his feet scraping the marble floor, into the mezzanine study. He threw him into the leather chair, staining it with blood. He walked to the door and locked it. He turned, unbuttoning the cuffs of his shirt, and began to roll up his sleeves. "Boss, what are you doing?" Marco stammered, his eyes wide with a new, dawning terror. "I'm loyal. I swear to God, it wasn't me. It was—" Luca's good hand shot out, grabbing Marco by the throat, slamming his head back against the chair. "You are going to tell me where she is." Luca's voice was not a growl. It was a dead, flat whisper, more terrifying than any shout. "You are going to tell me now." "I don't know." Marco shrieked, his voice high with panic. "I swear—" "You're right," Luca said. "You won't tell me. You'll beg me to let you tell me." He released his throat, and as Marco gasped for air, Luca's fist, the one on his casted arm, swung in a brutal, bone-breaking arc, shattering Marco's jaw. The remaining bodyguards stationed in the ruined hall stood frozen. They heard the first, wet, choked scream. They heard the sound of heavy objects being thrown, of glass shattering. They heard Marco's agonized, weeping pleas. And then, for a long, terrible minute, there was only silence. The study door unlocked. Luca emerged. His suit was still pristine. His tie was straight, but his right hand, his good hand, was split open and bleeding. His knuckles raw and white. He didn't seem to notice. His men stared at him. The man who had entered the room was their boss. The man who emerged was something else. A hollow-eyed angel of death. He held a small, bloody piece of paper. "He wants me at the Red Hook shipyard," Lucas said, his voice a dead calm. "Warehouse 7. He wants me to come alone. He knows it's a trap. He knows I know." "Boss, you can't," one of his men said, stepping forward. "We'll go. We'll take the team." "He said alone," Lucas said, walking past them, his gaze fixed on the elevator. "If he sees so much as a shadow, he'll kill her." He stopped at the elevator, his hand on the call button. "She is the only thing," he said, his voice a raw, broken whisper, "that holds me together. And they took her. They put their hands on her." He turned, his eyes so empty it terrified them. "This isn't business. This isn't a war. This is an execution." He stepped into the elevator, the doors sliding shut, leaving his men in the bloody, silent penthouse. He was going after her, and he was going to burn the entire world down to get her back. The air in Warehouse 7 was cold, thick with the smell of rust, diesel, and the nearby brackish water of the Red Hook Channel. Carla was chained to a steel support pillar, her wrists raw. The metallic tang of her own blood filled her mouth. Victor had not been gentle. Her cheek was split open, her left eye already swelling shut, but she kept her chin up. She would not give him the satisfaction of her tears. "He's not coming, you know," Victor Romano said, circling her. He was high on his own victory, his eyes bright with a manic, possessive energy. "He picked you, a maid, over his entire operation, over loyalty, Marco, my new best friend. He told me Luca's men at the penthouse are all dead. 4 of them? Good, loyal men. And for what?" He stopped in front of her, grabbing her chin, his fingers digging into her bruised skin. "For you." He went soft, and now, he's gone. He's probably bleeding out in an alley somewhere, wondering why his own cousin turned on him. All because of a broken little nothing he picked up off the street. Carla's good eye blazed with a hatred so pure it momentarily stunned him. "He will kill you," she whispered, her voice a low, rattling threat. "He will find you, and he will tear you apart." Victor laughed, a sharp, barking sound. "He's not finding anyone. It's over. You're mine again, Carla. And this time you'll never leave. I'm going to take you so far away. No one will ever—" A deafening boom shook the entire warehouse, the sound of the main corrugated steel doors being blown clean off their tracks. The explosion was so powerful it sent a shockwave through the building, shattering the few remaining windows. Victor spun around, dropping Carla, and drew his weapon. What the hell? Who's there? His men, about a dozen of them, scrambled for cover, aiming their rifles at the smoking, dark void where the doors had been. A figure stepped out of the smoke. It was Luca. He was alone. Just as the trap had demanded, he was still in his bloody, rumpled suit from the penthouse. His left arm still bound in its black cast. His right hand, his good hand, held a pistol, steady as a rock. His face was not human. It was a blank, hollow, emotionless mask of pure, cold wrath. "He's alone! Kill him!" Victor shrieked, firing wildly. Luca did not run. He did not duck. He moved. The first 3 shots from his pistol were a single. Controlled pop, pop, pop. 3 men, the ones closest to the door, fell. They didn't cry out. They just dropped. Their part in the play finished. He advanced into the shadows, a phantom in the smoke. Gunfire erupted, the noise deafening in the enclosed space. Bullets sparked off the steel pillar Carla was chained to, and she screamed, pressing herself flat. Luca was a wraith. He used his cast as a shield, deflecting a wild shot. He moved from container to container, his every shot precise. A man would lean out from cover, and Luca's gun would already be there. Another man fell, and another. He wasn't a man in a gunfight, he was a surgeon, excising a cancer. He moved with a speed that was terrifying, his injuries forgotten, his focus absolute. In less than 2 minutes, the warehouse was silent, save for the groans of the wounded. Only 2 of Victor's men were left, cowering behind a stack of crates. Victor himself was gone, having scrambled up a metal catwalk. Luca advanced on the 2 men. They opened fire. Luca took a bullet to his good shoulder, the force of it spinning him. But he didn't even grunt. He raised his pistol, his aim unwavering, and fired twice. Silence. "Victor?" Luca's voice, dead and hollow, echoed in the vast space. "It's just us now. Come out." "Go to hell!" Victor screamed from above. He fired down at Luca. Luca rolled behind a forklift. He looked up. Victor was reloading, fumbling with a new magazine. Luca put his back to the machine, his breath coming in ragged, painful gasps. He looked down at the new, dark stain spreading across his suit. He didn't have much time. He looked over at Carla. Her eyes were wide, fixed on him, full of terror and a fierce, burning hope. "It's a long way down, Victor!" Luca called out. "Not before I finish her!" Victor screamed. He leveled his gun, not at Luca, but at Carla. Luca didn't hesitate. He burst from cover, his good hand coming up, firing on the run. 1, 2, 3 shots. He emptied his clip, aiming high. One of the bullets struck the metal railing in front of Victor, sending a spray of hot shrapnel into his face. Victor screamed, clutching his eyes, and tumbled off the catwalk, landing with a sickening, wet crunch on the concrete floor 15 feet below. Silence. The warehouse was still, the air thick with smoke and the smell of cordite. Luca walked slowly, his boots crunching on glass. To where Victor lay, he was not dead. He was trying to crawl, his left leg twisted at an unnatural angle. He was weeping, a pathetic, broken sound. Luca kicked the gun away from Victor's outstretched hand and he stood over him, a dark, avenging angel. Victor looked up, his face a mask of blood, snot and tears. "Please," he whimpered. "Please, Luca. It was Marco. He set it up. He made me. I'll give you anything. Money, territory. Please." Luca looked at him, his expression unreadable. Then he crouched, his injured body protesting, and pulled his phone from his pocket. His good hand, bloody and split open, was shaking slightly. He aimed the camera at Victor. What are you doing?" Victor sobbed. "A confession," Luca said, his voice a dead, cold whisper. "For Carla. I want you to tell her everything." "What?" "Tell her," Luca growled. "What you did to her ribs. Tell her why." I, Victor stammered. Luca pressed the muzzle of his gun, still hot, to Victor's cheek. "Tell her. I was angry." Victor shrieked. She smiled at the waiter. I broke them. I broke her ribs." "Good," Luca whispered, the camera steady. "Now tell her about the boy. Tell her what you did to Nico." Victor's face contorted. "No, please." Luca pressed the gun harder. "I hit him," Victor screamed, the confession torn from him. He screamed. He saw me. And I hit him. I told her I'd kill him. I told her I'd cut his throat if she left. I told her. Luca stood up, the video still recording. He looked down at the broken, weeping man. "You did," he said. He put the phone back in his pocket. Are we good?" Victor pleaded. "You got what you wanted. Please, call an ambulance. My leg." "We're good," Luca said. He raised his pistol, aimed it at the center of Victor's forehead, and a single, final shot echoed in the vast, empty warehouse. He stood there for a long moment, the gun smoking in his hand as the last, violent tremor of his rage finally left him. He was empty. He was just a man, bleeding in a dark room. "Luca?" Her voice. It was a whisper, but it cut through the silence. He turned. He had almost forgotten. He stumbled toward her, his body finally screaming in protest. He fumbled for the keys on Victor's belt, his bloody, shaking hand struggling with the lock on her chains. "You're hurt," she said, her voice trembling as she saw the dark stain on his shoulder. "It's nothing," he grunted, finally getting the lock open. The chains fell away. She didn't run. She didn't cry.
She launched herself at him, her arms wrapping around his neck, her face burying in his uninjured shoulder. He roared in pain as she inadvertently jarred his entire body, but his good arm, his only arm, came up, wrapping around her waist, holding her so tightly he thought he might break her. He held her, breathing in the scent of her hair, her skin, her fear. "I've got you," he whispered, his voice cracking for the first time. "I've got you. You're safe." A low beep, beep, beep started up from the far side of the warehouse. Carla pulled back. "What is that?" Luca's face was grim. "My insurance policy." He grabbed her hand. "We have to go. Now." He had planted the charges on his way in, a dead man's switch. If he didn't disarm them, they would detonate. He hadn't disarmed them. He had no intention of it. He was erasing this place, erasing Victor, erasing Marco's betrayal. From the face of the earth, he dragged her, half carrying her, toward the smoking hole where the doors had been. They burst out into the cold, damp night air, running, stumbling, across the empty shipyard. "Get down," he yelled. He tackled her, shielding her with his own body, just as the world turned white. The explosion was immense. Warehouse 7, and everything in it, erupted in a massive, rolling fireball that lit the Brooklyn night sky. The sound a deep, deafening whoomph that rattled the teeth. He lay on top of her, his breath ragged, as debris rained down around them. He did not move. He just held her, the heat of the fire washing over their backs. "It's over," he panted, his voice muffled in her hair. "Carla, it's over." Back at the penthouse, a new one, a fortress in a different, undisclosed tower. Carla watched the rain trace paths down the glass. It had been 3 days. Luca, his arm reset and his shoulder stitched, was asleep. She was not. She was just still. The terror, the running, the constant, sickening adrenaline. It was all gone. And in its place was a vast, quiet emptiness. She felt hollow. He found her there, in the dark living room, standing at the window. He came up behind her, not touching her, his presence a solid, warm shadow. "You should be sleeping," he said, his voice low. "I can't," she whispered. "Every time I close my eyes, I see him. I see the chains." He stood beside her. "He's gone. Carla, he can't ever hurt you again." She turned, and the stoic, strong mask she had worn since her rescue finally crumpled. Her body was seized by a shuddering, racking sob. But it was not a sob of pain. It was not fear. It was release. It was 3 years of terror, finally leaving her body. It's over," she wept. "It's really over." Luca's good arm came around her, pulling her against his chest. She collapsed into him, her fists clutching his shirt, and she wept until she had nothing left. He just held her. He held her as the sun came up, his hand stroking her hair, whispering the same 2 words over and over. "I've got you. I've got you." Days turned into a week. The penthouse, once a silent, tense cage, began to feel like a home. The silence was no longer heavy. It was peaceful. Luca was in the kitchen, a dark gray apron tied awkwardly around his waist, struggling to chop an onion with his right hand, his left arm still in a simple sling. He was concentrating with the same fierce intensity he'd used on Victor's men. Carla entered, silent as a whisper. She watched him for a long moment, a small, slow smile touching her lips. "You're supposed to use the claw grip," she said, "so you don't chop your fingers off." He startled, nearly dropping the knife. "I know what I'm doing. I'm cooking." "I can see that," she said. She was holding something behind her back. "It looks like you're losing," he grumbled, turning back to the onion, and she came up beside him. She was wearing a simple, cream-colored apron of her own. She picked up another knife, and with the fluid, practiced ease of her old life, began to perfectly dice a carrot. They worked in silence for a few minutes, the simple, domestic sound of chopping filling the kitchen. "This is nice," he said, his voice quiet. "It is." She agreed. They ate dinner on the balcony, the city lights a galaxy below them. It was just pasta. It was the best meal of her life. I spoke to the school, he said, swirling the wine in his glass. Nico he's asking for you, and for me. He's safe. He's happy. I know, she said. I talked to him this morning. Good. He put his glass down. He looked at her, his dark eyes stripped of all their armor. The boss was gone. It was just Luca. I'm not good at this. Carla, at this. He gestured to the quiet, to the meal. My whole life has been the other thing. I'm not either, she admitted. I've only ever been running. I don't know how to stand still. Maybe we could learn, he said. He reached across the table, not for her hand, but for the key to the penthouse, which she now wore on a simple chain around her neck. He held it in his palm, the silver glinting. I gave you this so you could be free. I know, but I don't want you to be free, not from me. His voice was rough. This isn't a proposal. I don't have a ring. I don't know how to do that. He looked her in the eye, his gaze raw, vulnerable, and completely, terrifyingly honest. I want to protect you, not as a job, not as a debt, but for the rest of my life. Is that something you could live with? Me? Protecting you? Tears welled in her eyes, but this time, they were not for fear or for relief. They were for joy. I don't need you to protect me anymore, Luca. His face fell. I think, she said, her hand covering his. I'd just like you to love me. The protection part just seems to come with it. A slow smile spread across his face, the one that was just for her. I can do that. Yes, she whispered, her smile matching his. Yes, you can. And yes, I will. A week later, she stood alone in a quiet green cemetery. The plot was new, the dirt still dark and mounded. The small, temporary marker read, Victor Romano. Carla stood there for a long time, the wind pulling at her hair. She was not sad. She was not angry. She was just empty of him. He was a ghost, and he had no more power. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a single, small, tarnished key. The key to her old apartment in the Bronx. The key to her cage. She looked at it, then at the fresh dirt. I'm not afraid anymore, she whispered to the wind. She opened her hand and let the key drop. It landed on the grave with a soft, dull thud. She turned, and without looking back, she walked away. That night, she found him on the balcony, staring at the city. She came up behind him, just as she had in Brooklyn, all those weeks ago. But this time, she was not a frightened, hollow thing. She was his partner. She wrapped her arms around his waist, pressing her cheek against his strong, healed back. He relaxed into her hold, his good hand coming up to cover hers. They stood in a comfortable, shared silence. You really lost control, you know, she teased, her voice a soft murmur against his shirt. He let out a low chuckle, the sound vibrating through her. He turned his head, his lips finding her temple. Only for you. Thank you so much for listening to our story. We are so incredibly grateful you spent your time with us. We would love to know where you are listening from, so please drop a comment and tell us. Your support means the world. If you enjoyed this, please be sure to subscribe to Mafia Romance Stories for new chapters and tales. We read every comment, so please share your thoughts.